Hello and welcome to one of those lovely days again where we get to talk about Victoria 3 and the newest dev diary that has come out. This time we're going to be talking about buildings, but first of all, before we get into that, there is of course the Twitter teaser which is making a return, and this time we have this lovely image here, a teaser for tomorrow's Victoria 3 building dev diary. In Victoria 3, buildings represent a wide range of structures from industries to infrastructure projects. Here's a look at some railroads in Britain, one of the few places that already had active rail lines in 1836. We can see a closer video or closer image of it here. We can see how much yearly productivity it is making. You can see how many people are employed, 10,000. You can see how many cash reserves it's got. So if it starts to make a loss, it's got 50,000 in its reserves that it can burn through before it will shut down. We got production methods, which we'll see what goes on here. This looks like an armored car with guns on it, which is kind of interesting. Not sure again what this box is for. We can see it's expenses. It's spending a little over £4,000, mostly on rail cars, I guess locomotives, also coal, and then some wages. And it is generating 3.61, which is a loss. And that is coming from transportation. This is, it's basically, it's a trade good called transportation, I believe. And it is generated via the railroads. I believe it's probably also generated probably by ports, maybe by road buildings, I don't know. And also it's generating state region infrastructure of plus 40. Lovely stuff. I assume if we go onto the workforce, we can have a look at the different pops that work there. Capitalists, maybe, some laborers, that sort of thing. And then what modifiers we've got going on here as well. That's all. It's a relatively in-depth little image there. Good stuff. Now, how about we get into the dev diary and see if we can glean some more information from this. Let's go. Hello again, everyone. It's Thursday again, and that means it's time to talk about buildings. Buildings are a core mechanic of Victoria 3, and it's where the pups work to produce resources such as goods. Buildings represent a wide range of industries, businesses, and government functions, from humble subsistence farms to complex motor industries and sprawling financial districts. In this dev diary, we're going to broadly cover the main types of buildings and their function in Victoria 3. Now, I've been playing a little bit of Victoria 2 lately, and buildings in Victoria 2 generally was just your factories, and you had, I'm not even going to pretend to know how many different factory types there were, but they had, in general, an input, or 2 inputs, or 3 inputs, of your base goods that come from the ground, or are harvested by farmers, that kind of thing. Then they were turning that into a produced or a manufactured good, and those manufactured goods could also be used to in further factories to produce even more complex manufactured goods. And now we don't yet know what we're going to be like in Victoria 3, but I would imagine if they are serious about this increased complexity, then we're probably going to get something quite similar to that. So let's have a look. To talk about buildings, though, I first have to mention states. States are a concept that should be generally familiar to anyone who's played some of our other games, such as Victoria 2 or Hearts of Iron 4. A geographic unit of varying size in which much of Victoria 3's gameplay takes place. States are where pups live, and more importantly for our subject matter, where buildings are located and built. So they're constructed on the state level, which is exactly the same as factories were in Victoria 2. You had, say, you were in France, you would have the Ile-de-France region, and you could build factories in that region. You would have the Champagne region, which you'd build, factories there. You had, I think, like 4 provinces in Champagne. Each of those had its own RGO, or Raw Gathered Resource Organization. I don't know what RGO stands for. It's basically your goods on the map. And you would be able to, build factories and produce goods from there. So states are important in Victoria 3 as well, so that should be fairly familiar to anyone familiar with Vicky 2. Again, I'm not massively familiar with Vicky 2. I'm trying, though. I am trying. I've been playing it quite a bit. So we'll get there. So we have the state of Götaland in Sweden. It's part of the Swedish market. It's got this much infrastructure. As we can remember here, the railway increased state infrastructure by 40.8. Götaland has an infrastructure of 60. You can see its gross domestic product, 24.3%. Sure. Infrastructure usage, the market access, how many taxes and how many expenses you have. You can see what buildings are there as well. So possibly a furniture factory. Is this, I believe, maybe arable land? We've seen that before. And it's also got a grain farm, perhaps, and also cow pastures is what I would guess here. We've got a dock, maybe a fishery. That looks maybe like a lumber yard. There's a semi-transparent steel mill, maybe. And I couldn't guess on these two. But it does look here like we've got buildings split up into 4 different things. So if I was to guess, it would be manufactured goods, maybe transportation. If this is a dock that, you know, that you can build ships in, or instead of transportation, maybe it's a military. Maybe it's military area. This could be a barracks, perhaps, and maybe an officer corps, or an officer training school, something like that. We've got farmed goods on your arable land, and then maybe raw resources. This is something, it's like I say, it's just a guess. We can also see the standard of living of the pops that are living here. So it's at 9.2 out of something, 100 maybe? Maybe 10, who knows? 8 struggling. 8 what? What are 8 people struggling at? 8 pops? I don't know. We've got we've got 16 that are middling. Middling being, you know, you're struggling. Your standard of living is struggling. Your standard of living is middling, which honestly, I honestly thought was a colloquialism or a slang term. I didn't know that middling was actually a, you know, dictionary word. And then you've also got your secure pops. Okay, so maybe these are pop numbers. I'm not sure what this 9.2 refers to, though. I can see how many peasants we've got in the province, or in the state, I should say. This is the state of Götaland. And we've got 2 unemployed pops, perhaps. The full population is 809,000. Only 192,000 are peasants. You can see its growth. We can see how much migration is going on as well. Okay. So, we'll return to states more in later dev diaries, but for now let's keep talking about buildings. Before we start on buildings, something that is important to know is that buildings are just places where pops can work and generally do not represent a single building. A single level of government administration, for example, represents the necessary buildings and infrastructure to support a certain number of bureaucrats. Buildings always need qualified pops to work in them to yield any benefit, and an empty building is just that, empty and completely useless. This holds true even for buildings like railroads and ports that did not need pops to work in them in Victoria too. Okay, so that definitely puts to bed again the idea that, you know, you just need to build buildings and then you get your bureaucracy points. You know, you need people to actually work in them, and I would assume that just like this railroad is consuming coal, perhaps the bureaucrats will be consuming paper, for example. So, okay, that's fair enough, that's fine. Pops don't do, buildings don't do shit on their own, they need pops to work in them. That makes sense to me. Most buildings are directly constructed, but some, like the subsistence buildings below, will appear automatically based on certain conditions. When buildings are constructed, the construction uses pop, labor, and goods, and the costs involved will be subject to market forces. In Victoria 2, most factories, I believe, take cement to construct, but there isn't any laborers. You know, you don't need pops to be working labor to construct them, as far as I'm aware. I'm pretty sure that's the case. So this is something that has definitely become more complex with Victoria 3, which is nice to see more things become more complex. I mean, that is one of the big worries that people have, is that, you know, modern Paradox games are just being dumbed down. And for me, I came into Paradox games with the latest batch of them. I came in during CK2, EU4. I don't really play Hearts of Iron at all anyway, so it's irrelevant to me. But I have heard that people complain that, Hearts of Iron 4 is dumbed down Hearts of Iron 3, and EU4 is dumbed down EU3. Gib sliders. And I'm sure, like, the worry is there that Victoria 3 will be a dumbed down Victoria 2. That's a... I'd say, it's a fear. It's a fear that people have. I don't know. I couldn't say with any confidence whether it's a founded fear or not. That's not my place to say, so I'm not gonna. But it does seem like there is some added complexity here that there is not in Victoria 2. So that's nice. That's nice. But on to the different building types. First out, we have subsistence buildings. These are a special type of highly inefficient building that cannot be manually built or destroyed. Okay, but rather will appear anywhere in the world where there is arable land that isn't being used for another type of building. The vast majority of the world's population starts the game working in subsistence buildings as peasants, and much of the game's industrialization process is about finding more productive employment for your peasants. Okay, I'm liking this. I'm liking this. So, if we, go back to here, I imagine this here, this 26 subsistence buildings, perhaps? I mean, that looks like subsistence farms there. It's the same here. So, in Gotaland, we have 26 subsistence farms. So I guess this is another different type of building. We can't really make out what it is. And I guess the job of your game, if you are wanting to industrialize, is to get people to not work here, get these 192,000 peasants to instead work the factories that you're constructing, or work in your ports, or your railroads, or your mines, or your dockyards, or your proper farms, rather than your subsistence farms. That seems like a decent gameplay loop, as far as I can tell. Okay, and we can see the subsistence farm here. Again, this is Gotaland, so there's 26 of them. It is not very productive. It employs 202,000. Gives some taxes and has annual wages. You can see, I'm not really sure what these are going up and down, right? So yearly productivity is going up. The amount of employees are going down. Is that what we're seeing here? That seems like a reasonable guess, but we need some clarification on that, I think. And again, you'll be able to have a look in the workforce. You'll see all those peasants. You'll see what modifiers it has, all that kind of good stuff. All right, it's a subsistence building, which is a highly inefficient building that appears when there is unused arable land in a state. As soon as you start exploiting the potential it's using, this building will automatically get downsized. Okay, so you can't, you cannot delete them. Cannot be manually destroyed, but if you build something in its place, say a cattle ranch or a grain farm, it will be downsized automatically. That works for me. That works for me. I would like to say though that perhaps both could be true, right? Maybe certain policies that you enact via, honestly, what I'm thinking here is the Great Leap Forward, right? In China, where Mao Zedong built all these factories and forcefully moved a bunch of peasants from the farms into working in more industrialized labor, and it didn't work because everyone fucking starved, right? But I'm thinking maybe that could be a thing as well. It might already be a thing, right? It might be that if you have some decision or policy that you implement, it may have this knock-on effect of reducing the amount of available arable land, or maybe reducing the amount of peasants, and that could have a knock-on effect of starvation. Who knows? It might be a thing. But yeah, that looks pretty good. Second off, we have urban centers. Let's scroll down a bit so you can see everything at once. Like subsistence buildings, these are automatically created rather than built, with the level of urban center in a state being tied to the amount of urbanization generated by its other buildings. Urban centers primarily employ shopkeepers and provide a number of important local functions that we'll get to at a later point. So these are urban centers in Svealand. There's 2 of those. You can see its productivity is going up, the amount of employees is going up, if I am correct in this. This one has a cash reserve, whereas this one did not. You can see how many people it's employing, their wages, the weekly taxes. It also has various production methods. I guess you would need electricity, maybe, or maybe it's a gas lamp. I'm not sure what that really represents. And then this is clearly a tram. Maybe this is things that you can upgrade with certain infrastructures, perhaps? I don't know. It automatically appears where there's enough urbanization in the state. 1 level of urban center is created for each 100 urbanization in the state. Okay, and is this like a new city on the map? Is this like, you've reached 100 urbanization in the home counties, therefore Oxford has been created? Like, are we actually gonna be getting dynamically appearing cities? Is that actually gonna happen? Because if so, holy shit. If we don't have Oxford on the map at the game start, but then Reading hits 100 urbanization and Oxford just appears. Obviously, it wouldn't just appear. Oxford is a much older city than that. But it becomes relevant to the game. Is that what's going to happen here? Because that would be quite something. Not going to lie, that would be quite something. Okay. And this is the urbanization icon. Can we see that in here? Yeah, that looks like urbanization. There is no urbanization in Gotaland, which makes it kind of funny that they chose to show Gotaland here. This one... Wait, this is Subsistence Farms. This one's in Svealand, so where... Svealand, I think, is where Stockholm is. Maybe? Svealand. I think so. I might be wrong, but it doesn't really matter either way. But yeah, we got 2 urbanization, maybe 2 urban centers. So I guess Svealand has 200 at least urbanization. Okay. Next up, we have government buildings. These are buildings that are fully funded by the state and provide crucial civil services required for the smooth running of a Victorian nation. Examples include government administrations, where bureaucrats produce bureaucracy for the administration of incorporated states and funding of institutions, and universities, where academics produce innovation for technological progression. So bureaucrats work in government administrations to provide bureaucracy, the lifeblood of the government. Okay. Maybe these are laws then? It's really hard to see what production methods really refers to. But we have 4 government administrations in Svealand. It's got employment, it's got wages, taxes, expenses. It's using... Honestly, this looks like paper to me. This looks like paper. It's using 42 paper, which is costing £1,300. The wages £3,400, and it is creating 21 bureaucracy from that. That seems reasonable enough to me. And if there is 4 government administration buildings... Oh, but you can just click plus to build a new one. It's a bit wonky if that's the case. Let me just turn the music down just a smudge. It's a bit weird if that is the case, that you just click plus to create a new one. Like, that wasn't there for either of these, which makes sense, but I guess we do directly control these. It's also interesting that this is fully employed, and yet it's only producing 21. Because, if I remember correctly, the amount of bureaucracy we were getting from what was described as a fully staffed or fully employed government administration building was like 150. So where is that 150 coming from? Because I don't see it. I don't see it. Because say this is only for one of them. Times this by 4, so we have 84. That's still not 150. So I don't see the connection we have to the last dev diary here, which I unfortunately do not have up right now. Yeah. Not sure really what to make with this one. The numbers aren't making sense to me compared to the information we had before. Though, honestly, if this is the case, that we're getting 21 bureaucracy out of this, maybe it's because of the throughput or something that it's making this go instead of 20, it's 21 or something. If that is the case, that we're only getting 21 from this, not 150, I'd be much happier, because 150 it's too round. And I've said multiple times already that I think that even though it's not the case that it makes any fucking difference, having very rounded numbers, 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, something, numbers like those, makes things feel artificial, makes it feel fake. And the example that I pulled up on the No CB podcast that I am on every Wednesday that talks about various grand strategy news and updates, link in the description. Then the example that I brought up to kind of confirm my point on that is Mount Everest. When Mount Everest was first measured on how high it was, the measurement came out to exactly 29,000 feet. And instead of reporting that they'd measured 29,000 feet, they reported 29,002, because they knew that if they'd reported 29,000, that's too much of a round number and no one's going to believe them. And I believe the exact same thing happens here. I don't believe that the numbers that are being shown to me are organic. They look artificial and arbitrary because they're too round. It's a silly feeling, and it means nothing but the feeling, and the feeling is important. So, if this is the case here and not the 150, much happier. The counterpart to government buildings is private industries. The vast majority of buildings in Victoria 3 fall under this category, which includes a broad range of industries such as non-subsistence farms, plantations, mines, and factories. Unlike government buildings, private industries are not owned by the state, but rather by pops such as capitalists and aristocrats, who reap the profits they bring in and pay wages to the other pops working there. Usually, at least, under certain economic systems, the ownership of buildings may be radically different. So, under communism, the means of production, so the factories, are owned by the workers themselves, which, makes sense, and it's seemingly a really good idea. I don't know why we don't do that more. But yeah, that seems fine to me. So these are okay. There's plenty. These ones are also private industries. So what are our unprivate industries? We'll see. Many of these buildings are limited by locally available resources such as arable land for agriculture and simply how much iron is available in the state for iron mines. Urban buildings such as factories, however, are only limited by how many people you can cram into a state, simulating the more densely populated nature of cities. In short, there is no system of building slots or anything like that. We want limitations on buildings to function in a sensible and realistic way. So, arable land is going to be limited by how much arable land you have. Like your farms, you can't just build more farms, there's no space for them. But you can build as many factories as you like, which makes sense. You're just going to have to find the employees to fill those, factories. Okay, so several types of private industries are shown below. We've got, I'm assuming, like a furniture factory. We've got fish, that looks like lumber, yeah, that looks like an iron mine. And then you've got your two types of farms. We've got 26 unused arable land, which is then being turned into the subsistence farms that we saw above. There's a certain amount of timber in the province, so that's the 12. I assume that will go up and down depending on how much wood is in the province. There's only 5 units of iron available to build mines on, and there's 18 fish in the sea. So don't build more than 18 docks because there's only 18 fish. Yep. That's how it works. Okay. So these build resources, they're not giving any money, interestingly enough. And we're losing money on agriculture. We're gaining money on the... Well, that's 6.6, but we're gaining 8.6. So I don't know what's going on there. Maybe the urban center is giving 2? Let's have a look at that again. No, that's giving 8.6. Oh, wait, the urban center is giving 8.6. This is giving 6.6, so it's not added together, right? There is no, there's no mining building, so you can't, no resource just giving money. They're only coming from here. I thought this number was a product of this number. It's not. These are separate. This is only coming from this. This is coming from your urban centers. Gotcha. Okay, cool. Finally, there are development buildings. These are often, but not always, government buildings that distinguish themselves by providing vital state-level functions. A couple of examples are the barracks that can recruit and train soldiers from the local population, and railways that provide the infrastructure other buildings need to bring their goods to the market. So I assume we've got a barracks. Oh yeah, we don't need to assume. Barracks, port, naval bases, and railways. Okie dokie. Yeah, makes sense to me. To finish up this dev diary, I just want to mention that building up your country is meant to be more a hands-on experience in Victoria 3, as this is absolutely core to the society building aspect of the game and forms a major part of the game's core loop. This naturally also means that we need to give a player the necessary tools to manage their buildings in a large empire, which may involve some form of autonomous building construction. We haven't yet nailed down exactly what form that would take and whether it would involve decision-making on the part of the investor class. Ultimately, though, we want the player, not the AI, to be the one primarily in charge of the development of their own country. There you have it. There's a lot more here, such as production methods that will receive further explanation and many more dev diaries we have planned. Yeah, be sure to tune in next week as we talk about goods. Okay, so initial thoughts, I am relatively positive. The things that I didn't like in last week's talk about capacities, this is hidden. If this is hinting at a change to capacities, I'm very happy. Production methods, I want to learn about those. We've seen them a bunch of times now, and we have no idea what the fuck they do. But honestly, everything's looking kind of fine, looking good. Don't know what these mean. pH, not a clue. The shield, not a clue. Obviously, this is the flag. United Sweden and Norway, I believe, is that flag. This may be telling us that there's iron in the province, perhaps. But yeah, I don't see anything to be complaining about here. It all looks fine. Obviously, there's going to be some people complaining about this final paragraph to do with the capitalists. Obviously, a lot of people are kind of upset that the capitalists aren't just building their own stuff as they do in Vicky 2 with no input from the player. I'm less salty about that. I don't know if salty is the right word. I'm not minding that as much. It feels okay to me so far. Maybe if I played Victoria 2 more, I would be more up in arms about that. I don't know. But what I can say right now is there's nothing that's really looking terrible to me. This comment will be used over the next few days to collate developer responses for ease of reading. I love this! This is an amazing thing to do! Because, of course, what we have right now is the ability to show only dev responses. As this has only come out a few minutes ago, we'll see what we've got. We like the change to require POPs reports on railroads. Looks pretty promising. Will be cosmetic differences between buildings of different cultures. Not ready to discuss the map yet. Cool. Presumably they turn the extra 10 money into dividends, which is the thing. That is correct. As the cash reserves fill up, more and more profits will be withdrawn as dividends. Okay. I like bureaucrats use stationery to do the work. Can't count taxes with your fingers. I got a question though. What happens when the cash reserves max out? Like if a factory is putting £10 a week into its reserves, what happens to those £10? If the cash reserves are full, that money is paid out in dividends instead, which we talk about here as well. Did I read it right that we could create a megalopolis in southern Sweden with thousands of pops and numerous factories? I'm going to be a very autocratic figure to resell and keep my pops in megalopolis. Maybe a sort of a practical limit in the sense that you can't cram 5 million people onto St. Helena. I mean, Napoleon had a big enough head to fit in 5 million people, so I guess he did it alone when he was exiled here. But it should certainly be possible to have huge cities anywhere there's enough land, infrastructure, and jobs. Cool, good. Which crops can be grown depends on the state, so coffee should only be grown in places where it was either grown or plausibly would have been grown in the span of the era. Makes sense. It's a reasonable way to represent subsistence farming early game. Is there a way to improve the effectiveness of such buildings, or are they fated to forever be the Vic 3 equivalent of clerks? So you can improve your agriculture by building farms and plantations, I think enclosure systems and industrial agriculture, as opposed to tiny subsistence farms. Yeah, I mean, that was already clear to me in the dev diary that, if you want to improve your farming, you stop people from doing subsistence farming and you build your own farms. Makes sense to me, but whatever. I know the development visions will not change. That's, I mean, you're already on a downer. We've already seen that development visions can change, as we saw with the immediate backtrack on political parties instead of just having the interest groups. So, I mean, stop. Where are you going? Stop. Strong point in Victoria 2 is a private sector being independent from the government with a laissez-faire policy. Government deciding to produce lumber has sense in a planned economy but not in laissez-faire. So as it's easier to let the player micromanage the production than coding a better AI. I mean, your comment is incredibly hostile immediately. You're not going to get anywhere with it. While AI is of course a challenge, the main reason for this is that which buildings are built in your country is so fundamental to both the economic gameplay and society building aspect of Vicky 3 that we don't think it makes sense to not let the player interact with it. We don't want the game to play itself, so to speak. This is where I'm coming at it from. It's like, when you remove the ability to influence what gets built where, I mean, you're locking off a big part of the game. I don't think that's really a good idea. Nor is it a good idea if you lock off, the warfare part of the game, Mr. Bavarian Man. So, I mean, in the same way that having the player still have control over what the capitalist build is, giving the player more autonomy, letting people control their own armies is giving the player autonomy, and both things are good things. Do subsistence farms have a product? They produce a small surplus. Most of the peasants' labour is self-sustaining, though, so only marginally integrated into the wider economy. So a single RGO per province as a concept is dead. That's wonderful. Seems way more flexible in a realistic manner. I noticed, though, they only see 3 types of resource buildings based on the icons: fishing docks, lumber mills, and iron mines, I think. Is that because those are the only things available in that province? Would icons for coal mines, sulfur mines, rubber plantations, etc., be shown? I understand the player should ultimately be the national garden here, but if the player chooses to give investors the freedom of a much looser economic policy, I would love to see them get the freedom to do their own thing. Alright, yes, you can have numerous different mines, plantations, etc. as potentials that you can exploit in the same state, as long as you have the people to work for it and the infrastructure to support it. So yeah, I guess just confirming that there are different icons, maybe, for these different types of resources. Honestly, this doesn't really seem like a solid answer to the question being asked, but oh well. And finally, how quickly do buildings fill up with workers? If I build an iron mine, will it take months to employ the workers, or will it be instant? Well, it just depends on how many pops you have that are qualified for the jobs, whether these pops are willing to take the salary off it, etc. It's possible, for instance, for a mine to remain largely unproductive because there's almost nobody qualified to be an engineer in the state. Okay. Is the bar underneath each building employment? No answer. But yeah, that is the dev diary. That is everything we have to talk about today. I'd love to know what you guys think. Let me know if you have played Victoria 2 and whether this, what you're seeing here is a good representation of is an improvement. Do you consider this an improvement? What do you think about the change to capitalism and having control, or an amount of control, we don't know how much, of course, over what the capitalists are doing? Do you like that? Do you not? Let me know in the comment section below. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. If you want to keep up to date with Victoria 3 news and updates, hit the sub button. And I will see you guys in the next one, where we're going to be talking about goods. See you then.